All right, guys. Hey, thanks for joining me today. So a follow-up on the boron application of the corn. And so let's just start, because you guys had a lot of great comments, and I didn't have a whole lot of history in the first video. So you guys had said, what about compaction, root development? Are you in a wet spot, dry spot? What's going on? So there is no rhyme or reason to where these bad spots are as far as wet or dry spots in the field. Some of it's up on a dry spot, some's on a wet spot. There's no rhyme or reason. So corn emerges, pretty uniform emergence, but not too long after emergence, you could see some areas that were starting to suffer. And you're like, okay, maybe it's when I screwed up the fertilizer with the strip till cart when I was calibrating the strip till cart, and I screwed up the fertilizer, so maybe some of it has to do something with that. Don't worry, I'll come out with a top dress and catch this stuff up. So I came out with some 28% AMS and 1034O and squirted it on. I didn't have the drop hoses because the corn was small, and so I just let the jets just squirt down. And so you get a little bit of leaf burn, but on all my other fields this year, that little bit of leaf burn is gone. Gone. The plant just grew right out of it because it starts taking up that nitrogen, just whoop, and it's young enough and early enough in the season that it just recovered beautiful. This field did not, and so you can still see all the leaf burn from that nitrogen application. So then, after the corn did nothing, the corn, a 30-gallon mix of macronutrients like that, if you would have put that on any other field of any crop, you would have seen dark green, blue-green, just explosive growth, and these spots did nothing. I mean zero after a couple weeks. So then we're like, okay, something is clearly wrong. So I took the tissue test, and the tissue test said it's low on boron. So we put out the boron, the fulvic acid, the 31818 as a carrier, and we came out here and applied it. Now 5 days later, I almost had a video like, look at this, you know, it's great. Look at that color response in 5 days. It did more in 5 days than, now we're almost at a month time frame. You know, we applied on the 14th of June, and at the 20th of July, and at the 20th of July, you're like, wow, that boron is really kicking in. Well, you're now a month after that nitrogen application, and that corn is still doing nothing. And so with the boron, in 5 days, you can see the top of the canopy kind of greening up and some of the new growth looking good. But the old growth never healed, and you're just like, and the corn never did take off. And so I'll show you what we're up against here. So you got a row that looks like this, and then you've got that, and then over there. And if this was a soybean crop, you would say, oh, that's iron chlorosis, that's SDS, that's SCN, that's a, you know, typical soybean disease field. I've never experienced this before in corn. I have no idea. Like I said, geography of the land, wet, dry spots, it has no correlation to that. Emergence seemed good. You guys had asked about compaction and root development, so I came out and I dug up some roots. And the roots, you know, just, you know, they got that nice shape, and the roots are going down. There's decent moisture in the soil. It's not overly saturated. It's not overly compacted. And so that's a very confusing, like Confucius used to say, man with hole in pocket feel cocky all day. It's a very confusing scenario to have, and that's better. You were leaning a little bit on me there. But my next question is, you could see the top is kind of greened up. So there was some response to the foliar feed. Is it a timing? Was I too late? Because at that, you know, if it was in at the 14th, by the 20th, we're starting to see a little bit of a response. But historically speaking, by the calendar, by us, by the 20th of July, that corn is moving from vegetative growth to reproductive. So was I just simply too late in the season? So I reached out to John Kempf guys at Advanced Eco Engineering, and they sent me a sap analysis kit, or I bought a sap analysis kit, because this is going to be on the up and up. This isn't like, oh, look at my fraudulent business network corn next to my channel corn. One of them clearly writes a bigger check, so whenever one goes down, it's the other company. No, this isn't like that. We're legitimate. And so anything I do, I told them, I says, anything we do, it's on camera. We're going to see if we can. They're like, that's fine. We don't care. We just want to help get this spot diagnosed. I'm like, absolutely, absolutely. So we're going to get this spot diagnosed. And so we're going to send a chunk in. The sap analysis, I have nothing tangible to show you. It's not like this fancy laboratory kit that shows up. It's some barcodes that you label your Ziploc bags with the barcodes so they know what this sample represents. I mean, just like any other lab, you just get a bag and you just put the field 10, you know, home farm, blah, 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 and it's corn at whatever. So we're going to send in the sap analysis, and what they're saying is the sap of the plant is a much more accurate indicator of what's really happening inside the plant than a tissue test, because, you know, the tissue is weeks behind, you know, for tissue to grow and stuff like that. So what's happening with the sap is a much more true indicator of what's going on. So we're gonna sap test this, see if we can't diagnose. I'm just assuming there's nothing I can do this fall that I had to check battery. I'm just assuming there's nothing we can do this fall. But if they want to do an experiment, I'll see if they'll send me just a couple ounces of a product, so we can just come out with a hand sprayer, hit this little spot, and see. Does it do anything? I think it's too late to do anything, but at least we can diagnose. Since I've never seen this before, I think we can at least try to diagnose what's happening. Let's figure something out. So next year, whatever's coming in here, beans or wheat or whatever's coming in here, we don't have this again. And so then next year, what we're going to do in the spring is come out and get some soil samples from the good spots and from the bad spots. We're going to do your typical sales agronomist acid tests, but then we want to dive deeper into the Haney tests and some of the geological survey type testing to see what is really, you know, can we just keep, you know, drilling down on that soil testing to see if we can't find a difference between the good and the bad spots. Maybe it's something in the soil, maybe it has nothing to do with the soil. I don't know. But we're going to try and get this figured out, because I'm not going to have this happen again. And then what we're going to do is, starting from day, you know, it's hard not to Monday morning quarterback yourself. So right off the spring, when that corn came up and you started to see a little bit of a deficiency or a little behind, which is not uncommon on a year like this to see some spots slightly behind. And historically speaking, them spots after that fertilizer would have just picked right up anyhow. So I had no real concerns this spring until after the fertilizing. And then you're like, okay, we've got a problem there, Houston. What do we do? And so we're going to do as much diagnostic work as we can. And then whatever crop comes in here next year, we're going to sap analysis test that crop starting on day one, or as soon as them guys recommend the first test coming, because I have no growing season. We have no growing season. So up here, we can produce really good crops. It's pretty impressive, the crops we can grow on our land, but you have to do everything perfect. If you force the crop in, if you mud the crop in, you'll pay for it the whole season. If you're a little bit late, you'll pay for it. If one row unit's running a little deep or a little shallow compared to the other rows, you'll see that one row all the time. If your planter fertilizer, like the strip till, you know, made a mistake on my fertilizer, which I did out in this field, you will see that stuff all year long. There is no time to recover from any mistake here. And so we're gonna start sap testing day one and just sap test any corrective measure. Give it whatever time they say we have to give it. Next sap test, next corrective measure. And just see if we can't manage, actually really invest in the nutrient management and whatever crop is here to get the absolute best fertilizer bang for our fertilizer dollar, but to grow just the healthiest, prettiest, not biggest yield, but just the healthiest, nicest looking crop I can. Yield will come along, but we just need to get things healthy. And so that's what's going on. That's where we're going with this spot. And that's the end of the video, guys. Thank you very much for watching.